The cherry pie sat in front of Lila Bennett, its deep red filling glistening through the golden lattice crust. It was a sight to behold, and for a moment she let herself smile at the sweet gesture. The note that accompanied it read, "I made this just for you, Lila. Hope it reminds you of the cherry pies you used to bake with Marcus's father." It was from Selena, her daughter-in-law, the woman who had charmed her son, Marcus, into marriage after only 7 months of dating. Lila's mind briefly wandered to the day they first met. Selena, all bright eyes and a well-rehearsed smile, standing in the doorway of their home like a picture-perfect bride-to-be. She had looked so out of place, yet somehow, Lila had tried to push down the skepticism she felt rising in her chest. After all, Marcus had seemed happy, and maybe, just maybe, it was time for her to let him go. Lila placed the pie on the kitchen counter and turned to brew herself some coffee. She loved the ritual of it, the sound of the beans grinding, the steam rising from the coffee maker, the warmth that slowly spread through the kitchen as it filled the air with its rich, comforting scent. It was one of those mornings when everything felt peaceful, even if the house felt emptier than it used to. Paul, her late husband, had passed 3 years ago, and though she still felt the ache of his absence, there were days when she truly thought she could move on. She was almost done preparing the coffee when she heard it, scratching on the counter, followed by the familiar thud of paws against the floor. Odin, her rambunctious German shepherd, had jumped up, his nose already buried in the pie. "No, Odin!" Lila's heart dropped as she rushed over, but it was too late. The damage was done. The pie was wrecked, half of it already in his mouth, crumbs scattered like confetti on the kitchen floor. Lila grabbed the large dog by the collar, pulling him off the counter with a strength fueled by panic. His tail wagged, oblivious to the trouble he had caused. His drooling mouth hung open, eyes wide in excitement, completely unaware of the danger that pie posed. "Bad dog," she muttered, though she couldn't quite summon the anger she expected. Odin had always had a terrible habit of stealing food, but this felt different. It felt more dangerous, and her gut twisted uncomfortably, as if something was about to go terribly wrong. Lila walked over to the counter and stared at the ruined pie. The once inviting red cherries now scattered across the kitchen floor, the crust broken and misshapen. But it wasn't the mess that worried her. It was the way Odin was acting now. He lay on the floor, panting heavily, his body trembling like a leaf caught in the wind. His eyes were wide, unblinking, and his breath came in ragged bursts. "Odin?" Lila's voice cracked, her panic rising as she knelt beside him. "What's wrong, buddy?" Her hands shook as she ran them over his fur, feeling the tremors radiating through his body. He whimpered, his gaze unfocused, and Lila could feel her own pulse pounding in her ears. This wasn't normal. Something was terribly wrong. She couldn't waste time wondering what had happened. She had to act. "Stay with me," she whispered as she scooped the dog into her arms, half carrying, half dragging him to the car. The sound of her breath quickened as she fumbled for her keys. She dialed Marcus's number, but there was no answer. Neither was Selena's. She wasn't sure if the shaking in her own hands was from fear or the cold grip of realization that something about this pie wasn't right. Not at all. The drive to the emergency vet felt like hours. Each bump in the road made Odin's body twitch, and each time his breathing faltered, Lila's heart stopped for a beat. She pressed her foot harder on the gas, praying she wouldn't lose him. When they arrived at the clinic, Dr. Rodriguez, the vet, took one look at Odin and rushed him into the back. Lila, frantic and out of breath, sat in the sterile waiting room, her hands wringing together. Time felt like it was moving slower than it ever had before. Her mind raced, trying to make sense of everything. That's when she caught it. On the television screen above her, in a furniture store commercial, a man in a suit grinned, promoting a sale. It was the same man from the wedding, Thomas, the man who had introduced himself as Selena's uncle. Wait, Thomas wasn't her uncle. Lila had seen him before in those commercials, and now, seeing him in the middle of a commercial, her instincts snapped into focus. The pieces were beginning to fit together in a way that made her feel more sick than she had ever felt in her life. "Dr. Rodriguez," Lila's voice was shaky as the vet appeared. "Is Odin going to be okay?" The vet's face was pale, her eyes shadowed with concern. "Mrs. Bennett, Odin's been poisoned. We're doing everything we can, but the next 24 hours are critical." Lila's breath hitched and her world tilted. The pie, the act of kindness, the love for her late husband, it was all a setup. Someone had meant to harm her, someone she had trusted, her daughter-in-law, and now she needed to find out why. The tension was building and the dread was only growing. Lila's heart beat with a fierce determination. Whoever was behind this would pay, and she would make sure she found out who, before it was too late for her son, Marcus, too. Lila sat in the waiting room of the veterinary clinic, her heart pounding in her chest, fingers digging into the edges of the cold plastic chair. The bright fluorescent lights buzzed above her, but she barely noticed. All she could think about was Odin, her loyal companion who had, without realizing it, saved her life. If it weren't for his greedy attempt to eat the pie, Lila would have been the one on the floor, convulsing with poison in her veins. But now, Odin lay in the back, hooked up to an Roman 4 drip, struggling to fight off the toxins in his system. The sound of her phone vibrating in her pocket startled her, and she almost jumped out of her skin. It was Marcus. Lila swiped the screen with trembling fingers. "Mom, what's going on? I've been calling and texting, but Marcus, I need you to come to the vet's office. It's Odin. He's been poisoned." There was a long pause, and for a second Lila thought Marcus might have hung up. Then, his voice came through, laced with panic. "Poisoned? What the hell happened?" "I don't know," she said, fighting the tears that threatened to spill. "But you need to get here now." The line went quiet for a moment. "I'll be there in 20 minutes, he said, his voice urgent. "I'm coming right now." Lila let out a long breath as she ended the call. The tension in her body didn't dissipate, it only grew. Someone had intentionally poisoned Odin. But why? What could have been the motive? Her mind immediately went to Selena, Nora, whatever her real name was. Her generosity with the pie, her sudden kindness, too calculated, too convenient. There was something off about that woman from the start, and Lila had been too caught up in her own grief to see it. Her son's happiness had clouded her judgment. And now her intuition screamed that Nora was the key. Her fingers shook as she dialed the police, knowing she needed help, needed answers, but still unsure of how far this web of lies stretched. "I need to report a poisoning," she said when the operator answered. "My dog was poisoned, and I believe it was intentional. It's tied to my daughter-in-law. She made the pie." The voice on the other end was calm but firm. "Please don't touch anything. We'll send an officer right away. Stay where you are." Lila felt a cold chill sweep over her. She didn't know if it was from the air conditioning or the horror of the situation, but either way, it didn't matter. She had been a widow for 3 years. She had lost her husband, Paul, to a heart attack. But this felt different. Her heart twisted in ways she hadn't known it could anymore. Within 30 minutes, Marcus arrived at the clinic, his face pale and drawn. He rushed to her side, concern written all over him. "Mom, what's going on? What happened?" he asked, grabbing her hands in his. What's happening with Odin?" Lila's voice cracked as she explained what had happened, how the pie had been poisoned, how Odin had eaten it instead of her, and how she feared the worst. The vet came out shortly after, looking grim. "We're doing everything we can," she said. "He's stable for now, but he's not out of the woods. We'll know more in a few hours." Marcus nodded, looking at Lila with confusion and then frustration. "I don't get it. Poisoned? Why would anyone do that, to Odin or to you?" Lila met his gaze. "It's not just about Odin. This was meant for me, Marcus. I think someone is trying to kill me." Her words hit him like a ton of bricks. He stared at her, mouth agape, then slowly nodded as he pieced together the situation in his mind. You don't think it's Selena, do you? Her name isn't even Selena, it's Nora, and I'm starting to think we've all been lied to. After a long night at the clinic, Odin was still in critical condition, but there was a glimmer of hope. He had survived the worst of it, though Lila's worry still gnawed at her. She hadn't slept, hadn't eaten, her mind consumed with thoughts of what had just happened and what might come next. The next morning, she sat down with Marcus at the kitchen table. He was quieter than usual, still processing everything. His face was pale, and he looked older than his 33 years. I don't understand, Mom. I've been with her for almost a year. She was perfect. She seemed perfect. That's the thing, Marcus. People like Nora, they're good at pretending. They make you think they're perfect, but it's all a facade. I need to talk to her. I need to ask her some questions, Marcus said, his voice tight. Lila hesitated. Are you sure that's a good idea? What if she's dangerous? He looked at her, determination in his eyes. I need to know the truth. I need to hear it from her. We've been through too much, and I don't trust my own judgment anymore. Later that afternoon, Marcus confronted Nora at their house. Lila stayed in the background, pacing with her hands wringing nervously. Where is she, Marcus? Lila asked when he returned hours later. Mom, she's gone, Marcus said, his voice a mixture of disbelief and exhaustion. She packed up and left without a trace. She must have known we were getting close. Lila's stomach sank. Nora, or whoever she really was on the run. The truth was more twisted than Lila could have ever imagined, and she was about to find out just how deep this rabbit hole went. The police had confirmed that the pie contained a potent toxin that would have caused death within hours, but there was no trace of Nora. She had vanished. All Lila had now were the pieces, and she was determined to put them together. It wasn't just the pie. It wasn't just the poisoning. It was a much larger scheme. And Nora, or Nicole, was the mastermind. And now, Lila had a new mission. To find out the truth about the woman who had tried to end her life, and to stop her before she could do it again. Lila sat in the quiet of her home, the afternoon sunlight filtering through the windows, casting long shadows on the hardwood floor. Her fingers curled around the mug of tea in front of her, but the warmth didn't reach her chest. It had been 3 days since Nora, or Nicole, disappeared. The police were still following leads, but every minute that passed without finding her made Lila's skin crawl. Marcus hadn't been the same since his confrontation with Nora. His usual sharp demeanor had softened into something weary and distant, as if the betrayal had drained all the color from his life. He didn't know how deep the deception went, but Lila did. Nora's game was far from over. That afternoon, Lila decided it was time to take matters into her own hands. She'd spent the last few days reviewing every scrap of information she had on Nora. Her full name, the fake ID, the lies about her family, the inconsistencies with her background, it all pointed to something sinister. But Lila needed more. She needed a smoking gun, something that would tie Nora to the poisons, the fake identity, and the manipulation of her son. She pulled out her phone and started scrolling through the old photos from Tyler's wedding. That day had felt like a dream. Beautiful. Perfect. The kind of wedding people talk about for years. And yet, as she looked closer, something nagged at her. The people Nora had surrounded herself with, the friends who had no real connection to her, the strangers posing as family, Lila now recognized it as a carefully crafted act. Lila took a deep breath and grabbed the manila folder from the kitchen table, the one Marcus had brought to her after his investigation. Inside were photos, documents, and strange news clippings. The pieces she had pieced together from the private investigator, Marcus Webb, now made the truth clearer than ever. Marcus, she muttered under her breath as she flipped through the pages. I hope you're right. Her eyes landed on a photograph of a man named Thomas, the actor who had posed as Nora's uncle. In the background of the photo, Lila saw a familiar face, an older man with a neat suit, wearing a fedora. He was posing in front of what looked like a high-end restaurant. Lila had seen that face before. He had been the one who spoke with her at the wedding, claiming he was Nora's accountant. Lila's pulse quickened as the truth began to form in her mind. Nora, or Nicole, had been pretending to be someone she wasn't. But the real question was, why? Without wasting another moment, Lila grabbed her keys, slammed the folder shut, and left the house, heading for Marcus's office. The detective's office was only a short drive away, but in her mind the distance felt like a lifetime. Marcus was sitting behind his desk, his laptop open in front of him, the faint glow of the screen casting a cold light across his tired features. He looked up as Lila walked in, her face steely and determined. "Did you find something?" he asked, sensing the tension in the air. "Yes, I found something that could end this," Lila replied, her voice steady, though she felt her heart pounding in her chest. "I need you to dig deeper into her background. Thomas, the so-called uncle, he's not just an actor. He's been connected to a string of corporate frauds. We need to find out who's really behind this, Marcus. We need to stop her." Marcus blinked in surprise. "What? Are you sure about this?" "I'm sure. I've been looking through everything she left behind, and I found a connection between him and her real identity. There's something bigger here." He didn't hesitate. "I'll start running a background check on him. We need to figure out who's pulling the strings." Lila nodded, her mind racing. "I've had enough of sitting around waiting. Let's do this. We need to find her before she does something worse." That evening, Marcus called her with disturbing news. "Lila, you're not going to believe this. I found out about her husband, Robert Hughes, the one who died under suspicious circumstances. There's a pattern here. He was poisoned too, and he was wealthy." Lila's heart dropped. She did this to him too. "It looks like it. I'm going to check into his estate. There might be a trail leading to her." Marcus's voice turned serious. "Lila, this woman is dangerous. She's not just after money. She's playing a game that goes beyond anything I've seen before." Lila felt the weight of his words. Her son had married a woman who wasn't just manipulating him, she was planning his destruction. And now she was targeting Lila as well. "I need you to track down her real identity. I need to know where she's hiding and who she's been working with. I don't care how long it takes," Lila said, her tone resolute. "I'll get on it. I promise," Marcus said before hanging up. The following days were a blur of investigation, phone calls, and digging through endless documents. Marcus worked tirelessly, but it was Lila's dogged persistence that led her to the final piece of the puzzle. One morning, as she was sipping her coffee and flipping through Marcus's findings, a name stood out from the rest. Ava Richardson. Her real name. Lila felt the blood drain from her face. Ava Richardson. It was the name on the marriage certificate of one of her previous husbands, and it matched the one she'd used when applying for fraudulent loans. Ava wasn't just a con artist, she was a professional manipulator. Lila had uncovered the ultimate revelation. Nora, Nicole, was a seasoned criminal, and the life she had built with Tyler had been nothing more than a long con to get her hands on the Williams family wealth. And Lila was the final obstacle standing in her way. The only question now was how far Nora, no, Ava, was willing to go to achieve her goal. And Lila was determined to find out. The tension in Lila's house was unbearable. She hadn't heard from Tyler since their last conversation, and though she understood his confusion, her patience was wearing thin. Every passing minute felt like a ticking clock, the seconds moving too fast for her to keep up. She'd gotten to the truth, but now she had to stop the woman who'd been orchestrating the destruction of her family. Lila knew that Ava was running out of time, and so was she. The longer they waited, the more chances Ava had to escape or destroy everything. She called Marcus first thing that morning. "I need a plan. I want her cornered, now." Marcus was quiet for a moment, as if weighing her words carefully. "You want me to help you take her down?" "Absolutely," Lila replied, her voice cold but determined. "I've got enough on her to bury her, but I need you to help me find her before she goes any further." Lila had spent the night reviewing the information Marcus had given her. She knew that Ava was on the move, fleeing the consequences of her actions, but Lila was not going to let her slip through her fingers. Marcus was efficient. By noon, he called her back with an update. She's in a small town just outside the city. Looks like she's hiding out under a different identity. I've already sent a team to track her down. We'll have her in custody by tonight. Lila couldn't contain her relief, but it was quickly replaced by an overwhelming need to act. She had to be there. She needed to see Ava face to face, to demand answers. She owed it to her son. She owed it to herself. She packed a bag and set out for the small town with Marcus. The drive felt like an eternity. She could feel the weight of everything she'd uncovered pressing down on her chest. The lies, the manipulation, the fear. But she had one thing that Ava didn't have, the truth, and it was a weapon that could never be defeated. By the time they arrived, the sun was starting to set, painting the sky with streaks of orange and purple. The small town was quiet, almost too quiet. It was the kind of place where secrets could hide in plain sight. "Do you have her location?" Lila asked Marcus as they approached a small motel on the outskirts of town. "I do. She's in room 12, but be careful. We don't know what she's capable of now." Lila nodded, her resolve hardening. "I'll be fine. Just make sure the team's ready to move in when I give the word." They parked across the street, watching the motel from a distance. It was a shabby building, the kind that people drove by without giving a second glance. But to Lila, it was the place where she would finally confront the woman who had torn apart her family. The minutes ticked by, each one filled with the sound of her own heartbeat pounding in her ears. She could feel her nerves beginning to fray, but she kept her focus. Ava was only a few feet away. It was now or never. Lila took a deep breath and got out of the car. She was no longer just a mother trying to protect her son. She was a woman with a mission. As she approached room 12, her hand hovered over the door handle, but she hesitated for a split second. The silence around her was deafening. She could feel Ava's presence inside, like a shadow that loomed over everything she had fought for. Lila couldn't let her slip away now. With a firm grip, she turned the handle and stepped inside. The room was dimly lit, a single lamp casting soft shadows across the faded furniture. Ava was sitting on the bed, her back to the door, flipping through a magazine as if she had all the time in the world. When she heard the door open, she looked up, her expression unreadable. Lila didn't wait for her to speak. "It's over." "Ava," she said, her voice steady but firm. Ava's lips curled into a sly smile, but there was no warmth in it. "You really thought you could stop me, didn't you?" she said, her voice dripping with mockery. "You have no idea what you're up against." Lila stepped further into the room, her eyes never leaving Ava's. "I know exactly what I'm up against. I've seen the lies, the deception, the poison." Ava's smile faltered for a moment, but she quickly regained her composure. "You're a fool if you think any of this matters now. You can't stop me. You've already lost." Lila took another step forward, her voice growing colder. "No, Ava, you're the one who's lost. You're the one who's about to be exposed." She watched as Ava's eyes flickered with uncertainty. For the first time, she saw a crack in the woman's facade. "I know who you really are, Nicole Patterson, and I know what you've done. You tried to kill me. You tried to ruin everything. But the truth is stronger than any lie you've told." Ava's eyes narrowed, her hand twitching as if she were about to reach for something hidden. "You think you've won. You think you're some kind of hero. You're nothing, you and your pathetic dog." Lila's eyes hardened. "Max is a hero, and you're nothing but a coward hiding behind a fake name." Ava stood up, her voice rising with fury. "You have no idea what I've been through, no idea how hard I've worked for everything I have. You think I did this for money, for power? No, I did it because you, your family, have everything I've ever wanted." Lila stepped forward, her eyes never leaving Ava's. "You wanted to destroy my family for money. You used my son. You poisoned my dog, and now you're going to pay for it." Before Ava could react, Marcus and his team stormed into the room, guns drawn, and she froze. The jig was up. "You're under arrest for attempted murder, fraud, and conspiracy," Marcus said, his voice cold and authoritative. Ava's face twisted with rage as the officers moved in to cuff her. "You don't know what you've done. You don't know what's coming." Lila stood there, watching as Ava was led out of the room. She had finally won. Ava's reign of terror was over. But Lila knew this wasn't just about justice. It was about taking back control of her life and her family. And for the first time in months, she allowed herself to breathe. The echo of the door closing behind Ava, now handcuffed and under the watchful eyes of the officers, left a strange silence in the room. Lila stood motionless for a moment, processing the weight of what had just transpired. It was finally over. Ava, or rather Nicole Patterson, the woman who had spent months carefully plotting her downfall, was in custody. But even as the officers led Ava away, Lila couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. Something had been stolen that could never be returned. Marcus, who had been standing just behind her, clapped a hand gently on her shoulder. "It's done, Lila. She's not going anywhere." Lila nodded slowly but said nothing. Her thoughts were still with Tyler, her son. The betrayal weighed heavily on her heart. Yes, Ava was gone, but Tyler was still lost in his grief and confusion, clinging to the illusion of love that had been so expertly crafted around him. "Have you heard from him?" Lila asked, her voice small. Marcus hesitated. "Not yet, but he'll come around when the dust settles." Lila didn't feel so sure. How could Tyler come around when the woman he had married, the woman who had claimed to love him, had nearly killed his mother? How could he ever forgive himself for not seeing it? She had to see him. She couldn't let him drown in the shadows of this deception, even if it meant confronting the hardest part of this ordeal. Lila drove home in silence, the weight of the day still pressing down on her. The house felt too quiet, too empty. Even Max, who had made a miraculous recovery after the poisoning, lay stretched out on the couch, his golden fur gleaming in the afternoon light. He seemed to sense the tension in the air, his usual enthusiasm replaced with a quiet calm. Lila sat down on the couch beside him, her hand resting gently on his head. "We did it, Max," she whispered. "We stopped her. We saved everything that mattered." Max lifted his head and placed it in her lap, his tail thumping softly against the floor. It felt like a small comfort, but Lila needed it more than ever. She needed the reminder that she was not alone. But the peace was fleeting. As soon as the clock struck 5 p.m., her phone buzzed. Tyler's name appeared on the screen. Lila took a deep breath before answering. "Tyler!" His voice came through strained, like he was still processing everything that had happened. "Mom, I don't know how to say this. I'm coming over. I need to see you. I think I finally understand." Lila's heart skipped. This was it, the moment of reckoning. Her son was finally ready to face the truth. "I'll be here," she said, her voice steady. "Take your time, Tyler. We'll talk when you're ready." As she hung up, Lila's fingers brushed against the familiar photo on the mantel, a picture of her and David from their first anniversary, before life had become so complicated. She hadn't thought much about that moment in years. It was a simpler time, a time before the lies had taken root, before the world had become so uncertain. And yet, as she stared at the photo, something shifted inside her. She wasn't that woman anymore. The woman who had been caught up in the past. The woman who had allowed herself to be a victim. She was a survivor. And that was what she needed to remind Tyler of when he walked through that door. An hour later, the doorbell rang. Lila stood up, feeling the tremor of anticipation in her chest. She opened the door to find Tyler standing there, his face drawn and weary. His usual confidence was gone, replaced by a vulnerability she hadn't seen in years. "I'm so sorry, Mom," he said, his voice cracking as he stepped inside. "I never should have let her in. I should have listened to you. I don't know what I was thinking." Lila pulled him into a tight hug, holding him close as if she could absorb his pain. "I know, sweetheart, I know. It's not your fault. You didn't know what she was doing to us, to you." Tyler clung to her for a long moment, and for the first time in months, Lila felt the weight in her chest lift, if only a little. She had her son back. When they finally pulled apart, Tyler looked at her, his eyes filled with regret. "I let her poison our lives, and I almost lost you. I was too blind to see it." Lila shook her head, her eyes softening. "You weren't blind, Tyler. You were deceived just like I was. But we're awake now. We can rebuild. We can fix this." Tyler nodded, wiping his eyes with the back of his hand. "I don't deserve you, Mom. I was so caught up in her lies. I couldn't see what was right in front of me. You, Max." Lila smiled, brushing his hair back from his forehead. "You deserve everything, Tyler. We all make mistakes. The important part is what we do after we realize them." They sat together on the couch, talking late into the night. About Ava, about the pain, about moving forward. Max lay at their feet, watching over them as if he understood the magnitude of the moment. Lila realized that it wasn't just about justice being served or exposing Ava's lies. It was about healing. It was about starting over. And so, as the night wore on, Lila felt a flicker of hope ignite inside her. She wasn't sure where the future would take them, but she knew one thing: they were stronger now. They had each other, and they had the truth. That was more than enough.